Okay, so we're back for our third installment, and as you might notice, there is a particularly dumb face that is added to the mix. So please welcome our guest star, the very intelligent.
I'm not a guest star. I just haven't been able to make it so far.
Yeah.
He is a guest star.
And he could become a main cast
We
I
might
will
see.
become a main. As y'all will be able to see, I have a lot of really cool, useless movie insight and not much else.
He does.
Also, a lot of dumb comments that won't really contribute.
This is my brother Noah, Noah Popiel. So, last night actually, it looks like it's still night, but it's actually morning. We got because John's got to go to school, but we watched Platoon, which was totally John's idea. Unlike the other two movies, we haven't seen. Neither of us have seen this one before. Wait, no, you just you.
I had seen it. Yes.
Okay, so he had seen it.
Next time we'll hopefully.
Me
we'll
and
do one
Noah
that
hadn't
I've
seen
not
it.
seen and they haven't seen it.
It's a historical drama like the others that we watched. And the crazy part about it is that, number one, I was reading about about the Vietnam War in my history book for school. And then number two, that same day, yesterday, two Vietnam vets came into our class to talk to us about their experience in the Vietnam War. And they brought in this M16, which apparently was a movie prop in this movie. And not only
Dang,
that.
I didn't even hear about that.
Yeah, isn't that cool?
Yeah, I know he brought that in for us last year too.
Yeah, and grenades from the Vietnam War too. And he went over to one of my classmates, Vivian Herring, and just pulled the pin and gave it to her, and she's but
Who was
Oh,
it?
no, we're gonna have to scratch your name
Who
from
was
the
it?
podcast.
yeah, I guess so. Or she'll get hunted down. You know?
Who'd you give it to?
Vivian.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and no. To be fair, she didn't. She only jumped a little bit. But anyway,
As long as she just held on to the trigger. she's
exactly, you'll be fine. It's so funny because the grenades were empty, but they still had the pins hammered, so they couldn't be pulled out. So they were just in case. But not only did they have a prop from the movie, but one of the gentlemen who fought in the Vietnam War there was an infantryman in the 25th Infantry Division, which is the division that this movie is about, which is really cool. So,
Dang, I bet that's like PTSD for him to watch the movie then.
yeah,
Have you seen it?
I bet so.
Did you ask? I know you said you asked about.
So
the
I
movie.
asked,
Did you
and
ask
so
about
the
this
funny
one?
thing is, I asked about Platoon, and I got an answer from the other guy, not the dude who was actually, which was so funny because the other guy was an Air Force mechanic,
Yeah.
and so like he saw a lot of
Maybe he just like didn't even want to talk about it.
Yeah.
He was just like,
Well, I mean, as we will talk about later, I mean, this movie was so realistic that certain people just couldn't
what
take
he said about it was he said it was just only a passing comment. He said that the details about it were pretty accurate, but the good versus evil wasn't real. So I don't know if he's referring to
I think he might be referring to just the plot in terms of the
like in the
sergeants.
inside of the
It'd be like-
platoon.
Yeah, I mean, I think I understood why you have to have some
Yeah.
type of conflict going
Yeah.
on. You have to have kind of a good guy,
Yeah, not only that, but just like also kind of like what they were faced with like the decisions they were
Yeah.
making about the
Yeah.
Vietnamese.
Oh yeah.
And like I get like in the movie it was like showing they're really angry at them, you know,
Yeah.
and that was like, but like maybe he was just kind of like
Uh-huh.
a little bit sour towards that, obviously.
Oh
'cause
yeah,
he
yeah.
was young.
But I'm sure there were conflicts with different types of conflicts within the platoon. Maybe not
Mhm.
so drastic where it's like you have this guy that's just
Yeah.
totally evil.
But I mean, these are people.
Well,
literally-
before we get too far down the rabbit hole
Yeah. Anyway.
in the introduction,
Yeah. That's what I do on paper.
let's have John. He's the more educated one on this. Talk about the movie specs, as always.
Okay, so this movie is directed by Oliver Stone. He was actually served in Vietnam in the 1967 and 1968 in the 25th Infantry Division. He was also in, I believe, the 107th Cavalry, if I'm not mistaken. So he served 2 tours of duty, I believe. And so yeah, he wrote and directed this movie. It was a passion project of his. He wrote it back in the 70s, and it took him about 10 years to get the financing for it. So it's produced by Arnold Copelson, who was a pretty well-known producer back in the day. He also produced the movie The Fugitive, if for all those who have seen that, with Harrison Ford, after this movie. It has a great young cast of relative unknown actors at the time, but some of them went on to have big careers. Charlie Sheen, until he went crazy, but he's doing better now. Willem Dafoe, who went on to have a massive career, as one of his biggest roles was the Green Goblin in the Spider-Man trilogy from the early zeros. And it has Tom Berenger plays the evil Sergeant Barnes, who's a real psychopath, and to say the least. And it has a young Johnny Depp
Who's
in a very minor
unrecognizable.
role that you wouldn't recognize him
wouldn't
probably,
recognize
because
him,
if you're looking for like like traditional Johnny Depp,
Yeah,
no, you're not. It's not
I
him.
definitely.
It's like his second movie or something. I think he was in A Nightmare on Elm Street first, but I mean this was like probably his second or
That was a
third
little
movie.
bit of a tone shift.
Yeah, but that's one of the cool things about this movie, and we'll talk about it more later, is that all these actors were basically completely unknown, and the reason Oliver Stone wanted it that way was because he wanted the movie to be as realistic as possible, and he put these actors through this intense 2-week military boot camp that would be the exact type of boot camp that the actual Vietnam recruits would have gone through. So that just enhanced the realism. Anyway, the movie was released in 1986, and around Christmas time, actually, which is an interesting time to release this type of movie. But it did very well. It made back its budget and more. It was commercially successful, and it was critically successful, as it won 4 Oscars. I believe it was for Best Cinematography, Best
Dang.
Editing, Best Directing, and Best Picture.
Wow.
So at the Oscars, so some of the biggest ones. Oliver Stone took home directing. Arnold Copelson took home Best Picture. Fun fact: Oliver Stone would win it again 2 years later for another Vietnam movie called Born on the 4th of July, which perhaps we'll cover someday. Anyway, and so now Noah is going to kind of go over a brief plot synopsis of Platoon.
Yes, definitely spoilers
Yep.
alert. We're gonna like go through like the plot and stuff. Basically, like the movie's general like gist is capturing the essence of like this platoon.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'd say it's more about like just kind of like how this platoon operates and like what goes on inside more than like the Vietnam War or any particular battle. You know.
There's lots of great character development. You get to
Yeah.
know these characters.
There's conflict and strife between the characters, but mostly it's centered on this character who volunteered. Chris is his name, and he's played by Martin Sheen, right?
Charlie Sheen.
Charlie Sheen.
His dad's Martin Sheen.
Yeah, Charlie Sheen, and he's kind of like the new guy, and he volunteered, and his reasoning is that like the rich should have to participate too, not just the poor.
But he left his university studies
left.
to
He made a comment that he wasn't learning anything anyway,
Yeah.
which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think there was like an element of wanting to prove himself. So he volunteered, and he ends up in this platoon, and the platoon has the sergeant of Sergeant Barnes, who's like this pretty scary, scar-faced dude who's pretty soulless, really. He's like he's not too concerned about what
Anybody?
his actions do or anybody. And then there's the staff sergeant. What's his name?
Barnes is the staff sergeant.
Barnes
so
is the staff
he's a little
sergeant.
bit above Elias, who's the
Okay,
sergeant.
Elias is the sergeant, and he's the like more kind of like good. I'd say good guy. He's got more of a conscience. He's more a little bit ethnically aware, or like ethnically aware.
He's ethnically aware.
Yeah, he's a little more
And ethnically, I mean, he has more care for the locals.
Actually,
That is true. He has more character.
Actually, the
Right
most
on.
ethnically aware character
And apparently-
is
Yep.
Johnny Depp, who can speak
Yeah.
both languages.
And fun fact, though, he's like the translator. Fun fact, speaking of like the character of Elias being ethnically, caring, he actually is the person on which he is based, that Oliver Stone served with in a platoon, was actually an Indian, and he couldn't find a good Indian to play him,
Oh, that's
like
so-
an Indian American. But
That's unfortunate.
but he got Willem Dafoe to incorporate a lot of Native American mannerisms kind of into his performance.
That's funny. That's interesting.
Anyway,
Yeah, but so there's a lot of strife between the two because they have very like conflicting like thoughts on how they should treat the Vietnamese people and stuff, and it escalates through the movie, and eventually there's this scene where they capture this village, and for whatever reason Elias like isn't there. He kind of goes off.
he was stationed back at the barracks.
Yeah, so he's stationed at the barracks, and Barnes is there. And Barnes really just lets his men loose, and they just kind of
the bunker complex that they
they just kind of wreak havoc, and they kill some of the Vietnamese people, and I think they rape some of them.
Although there's a couple guys who are more loyal to the
Yes.
Yeah,
Elias
Charlie
dude.
in that scene though, Chris is like he has his moment where he kind of shoots this. He acts like he's gonna shoot this retarded Vietnamese kid, makes him a cop on one leg, but he eventually has kind of he realizes that
He
not that they're wrong.
He has a bit of a
they're-
psychotic
yeah.
breakdown for a moment
But there's
because
also
of the pressure.
strife in him between who to follow, because at first he really respects Barnes and he really likes Barnes, but as the movie progresses, he starts to see, all right, this Barnes guy isn't all I thought he was. Maybe Elias is more.
Yeah, and then, so he ends up kind of being more on William Dafoe's side. I'm sorry, he's William Dafoe to me. Elias. He ended up being more on Elias' side, and is sort of trying to
they become friends.
stem the atrocities.
But it basically
moving on.
It ends up with Elias comes back and he sees like what he does, and he attacks Barnes and the people break it up, but that really escalates the tension between Elias and Barnes.
And I think it's important to mention though that Barnes killed he specifically killed the wife of the village chief because he thinks that they were harboring NVA or North Vietnamese or Viet Cong soldiers and grain and everything.
Yeah, so he kills her, and mostly because she was just
and
yelling.
And he threatens to kill the daughter, and then the fight breaks out.
It's a crazy scene because he's sitting there with a 45 up to this dude's little girl, and then the other guy shows up and he's like, "What?"
He's like, "Barnes!
Yeah, so
You're on a firing squad."
Needless to say, he commits some war crimes.
All right, but moving on to
so moving on, after that they go and a lot of the movie is just within their platoon, and stuff, and they get involved in some a few other battles, and in this one particular battle, Elias kind of goes on a rampage. He goes by himself, and he ends up killing a lot of Viet Cong, and he gets back, and Barnes is the only guy who sees him, and Barnes holds his gun up to him, and then he realizes it's him, and Elias just smiles like, "It's me, I made it." And Barnes just re-shoulders his gun and shoots him. And that's
because Elias was going to be a witness to in the court martial of Barnes for killing that illegal killing.
Yeah, because Elias witnessed
Barnes.
It's pretty obvious he committed some.
Well, all the soldiers witnessed it. He was the one that was willing to testify.
Yeah, I think the other soldiers were honestly pretty scared.
Yeah, because at this point, half of the platoon, half of the platoon is with Barnes more. It's kind of like the bunny character that wears the thing coming out the back of his helmet that kills the kid with he smashes his head. Half the platoon is kind of on Barnes' side and half the platoon is on Elias' side. So this conflict divides the whole platoon.
So Elias is the only guy who's definitely gonna,
My favorite shot of the whole movie is when he's smiling and you can see him smiling through, it's got a shot of just his eyes, and then it shows the muscles right under his eyes fall as he.
Because he realizes. It's just he knows.
Yeah.
It doesn't show his mouth at all. It just shows those muscles under his eyes, and you can tell he's just got that moment of, oh dang.
Because he knows there's nothing he can do. So he gets shot 3 times.
Yeah, in the chest area.
And then the Viet Cong raid the area, so you're just kind of
and they're evacuating. The Americans are evacuating out.
As they're evacuating, you see Elias actually lived. He's running away from literally the whole Viet Cong, and he's just running away, and they're shooting at him and shooting him, and he's just falling down and getting up and just trying desperately to
be
away.
fair, they were trying to give him pretty good air cover with those helicopters.
Yeah, but they didn't stop for him. They were, and then there's this legendary shot where he just goes to his knees and he's like, "Why did you leave?" Because he's betrayed at this point.
He's
It's
but it's not cheesy. It really works. It works. It works.
It's kind of like the Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah, it's very mean, but in the movie in the movie Platoon, which is what it's originally from, it works.
Yeah, because
very well.
he did just get betrayed, and it's unfortunate because he's such a good soldier. And
Barnes gives that look. He's obviously super nervous when he sees him running, and he's and then when he dies, he's has such a look of relief.
Because Chris knows.
Yeah, Chris senses that
because he saw Barnes come back, and Barnes was he's dead, let's go.
And that would be suspicious. Why aren't we getting him? Why aren't we bringing him back?
He even says to his fellow soldiers, he's it was in his eyes, man. He's the proof's in his eyes. I just know.
So when he sees Elias running back, he just kind of is and Chris just looks at him and he's bro, I know.
Yeah.
So that heightens the strife between them.
And then moving on to when they get back to base camp.
Yeah, so they get back, and the movie, the climax is this insane battle.
Well, though, first talk a little about the scene in the bunker where they're talking, where Barnes comes in with he's like drinking, and he.
Yeah. So
that's an important
there's
scene.
this scene where
Right before that battle.
Right before the battle, where basically like the tension between the people who were kind of like on Elias' side and Barnes is like completely heightened, and Chris is trying to say that they should kill Barnes. He thinks they should kill Barnes because he thinks that Barnes is basically evil at this point, and that he's gonna hurt more people, and that they should kill him. Some people are kind of like for him, but then they're kind of like, most of them are of the belief that Barnes has been shot 7 times and he hasn't died, and he's just not meant to die. Like, this guy is not gonna die. So Barnes comes in and he's drinking, and he's kind of like, sure, look, if any of y'all want to kill me, go for it. And Chris like attacks him from the back and like hits him a few times, but then like pretty quickly Barnes just like gets him over, pummels him, and then pulls a knife on him. Yeah. And who was it, Junior? No,
one of them convinces him not to kill him because he'll get sent to prison,
guy,
military prison. So he cuts him beneath the eye. And
he convinces.
He's like, I spit on all of you.
Yeah, so that happens.
Because at this point, Barnes is just completely crazy.
Barnes is just like off the rocker at this point. He's killed Elias, which is like their best asset. So,
yeah.
Like, but
it was all his fault that he felt he had to do that. Because
it was his fault originally because he,
Anyway, moving on to the final act.
Anyways, the final act is this massive battle, this firefight where most of the platoon is wiped out except for like Junior and Chris.
Junior gets killed.
Oh, he does?
Junior's this little black guy who's very kind of feisty, and he's
Or
kind of annoying.
Kinda
He's on Barnes' side more, and anyway, he gets killed in the final battle. He and Bunny both get killed. Remember, he gets bayoneted.
Oh yeah, that was.
He runs into a tree.
He runs into.
He runs into the tree. That was
he's like, ooh, and then
like
he just,
everything in Vietnam that can kill you. Like there's like the Viet Cong, and there's like snakes and all this stuff, and he runs into a tree.
But an important part of that last act is each character kind of has their breakdown at the end there.
Oh yeah. Like,
though we haven't mentioned the lieutenant who's in charge of the platoon is completely irresponsible. He lets his subordinates basically tell him what to do.
Yeah.
Barnes and Elias are under this guy. His name's Wolf, and he's just completely inept at doing his job as the lieutenant of the platoon. And at the end, he has a breakdown. He's just, I just don't care anymore,
everybody, like right before the
Junior has his breakdown.
Yeah,
O'Neill is like, I don't think I'm gonna make it out of this one.
Yeah, Junior sprays like
bug repellent to make it look like his feet have been.
To try to like get Bailey. What are you doing? Go dog.
Anyway, yeah.
So they all kind of have their own breakdown, and then some of them, their term is up, and they want to leave.
And one of them gets out right as King gets out right before the battle.
King gets out, but then this other guy, he has like 3 more days and assumes he's going to be put on the chopper with him. And Barnes keeps him, which is like unfortunate. And he's like, look, I got this feeling. I think I'm going to die. I'm not going to make it out of this,
Well, he's Barnes' like friend, so he thinks that Barnes will get him that.
Yeah. So he goes into this last battle, but he ends up surviving, which I did not suspect, but he does. So
he's kind of he's not the bravest in the platoon, I would say. He hides under like a body.
Then again, like the entire Viet Cong was like raiding.
So
I would probably hide under.
But he's kind of portrayed throughout the movie as being this real arrogant, haughty type of character that needs,
But so ends up.
Anyway, let's finish it up.
The platoon is mostly wiped out, but then a lot of them survive, and Barnes is wounded. And he's laying there, and Chris comes across him, and he finds him, and he ends up shooting him and killing him, just kind of like Barnes did for Elias.
Oh yeah, and there was what ended kind of the battle was the Americans were getting overrun, and then they had this massive airstrike that's that they drop on the Viet Cong, but it's right by the camp, so it's like close. What would they call it? Close. It's right at the. Some Americans could have gotten killed too.
For sure.
But so that's what ended the battle, and then that. That
and then that happens, and then Chris kind of went on a rampage. He kind of like found his thunder during.
He got wounded during.
But he got wounded pretty bad. Just banged up all around. So he ends up getting to go on the chopper, and he gets to go home. And the last shot is like his narrative leaving Vietnam, saying like how it's going to stick with them.
Yeah. But the narration is very good. He does it very well. Anyway, All right, so I guess now we can move on to talking about positives and negatives.
Pros and cons, yeah.
Yeah, pros and cons. All right, so if we'll each give a positive and each give a negative, and maybe do 2 each or 3.
Pro of this movie.
You go first. Make your first positive.
It's a very nuanced view of the Vietnam War. It's not very black and white. You would expect from a Vietnam vet that it would be like strictly from the American perspective and sanitized in that way, but you get to see all sorts of different things that went on this war, including the atrocities committed against the Vietnamese people. You know, so it's really balanced in that way, and it makes for a more interesting viewing experience, in my opinion. So that's the pro for me.
So yeah, my biggest positive on this movie is you really feel like it's very you feel like you're there, like the atmosphere is very well crafted, and part of that's probably due to the fact that it's directed by a Vietnam veteran. He knew what it was like, so he was going to make it as real as possible. But you feel like you're there with the soldiers. You feel like you're down there in the mud with them on these night ambushes. And it's and during these big battles and stuff, and you really start to you just feel like you're there. So the atmosphere in the movie is very, very well done.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say about there's no way you could say, oh, the director doesn't know what he's talking about. He knows what he's talking about. He was literally there. So my mind goes to cinematography right off the bat. I think the camera work is really good.
Oh yeah, it is.
It's not like one of those movies where you're like, dang, the camera work was really good. Like, it's not like, it's not like, it's not like Overboard, but like the way it's shot.
For being a $7 million movie, it's pretty darn good.
Yeah, it's really good for in the way it's shot. It really makes you feel like you're in Vietnam. It really has a lot of like cool distant shots, a lot of cool shots showing the environment. Really cool, especially for a place like Vietnam, which really gives the movie cool scale. So I'm gonna say cinematography.
Yeah, cinematography is definitely A+. It's any other positives or standouts for you, Nate?
I'm going to go to the negative, which is that the gun sound effects were weird.
And the kicking sound effects. It was like, boom, boom. It was like
technical. So you're going technical on us.
Maybe the sound mixing could improve.
Yeah.
Like when he attacked Barnes and Barnes needed him, it was like, boom. I was like, what was that?
Yeah.
And the first time somebody opened up, it was like,
and my other biggest, so I'll go one more positive, or one of my other biggest positives on this movie is that the character development is awesome. For a war movie like this movie, you really see the character development, because over the 2 hours of the movie, you get to know each of these characters somewhat. Really and that's what's important, because it's about this platoon. So, it's about getting, and the director allows you to get to know these characters in the platoon. And they're all composite characters based on people that he actually served with, which makes it even more interesting.
Yeah, that's
and in an interview I saw, which in a documentary about it, he was like, that's the platoon. I mean, that's accurate. I mean, it's made up of a group of men, and they all have their different personalities, and they're different, they're all different in how they act and how they view what they're doing. And the character development is very good. And like I said, I love how they each have kind of a breakdown at the end. Like it builds it up, and they all end up just, they just can't take it anymore,
Yeah, which I think is pretty accurate.
Yeah. Anyway.
I'm going to say my negative is this movie sacrifices a lot of plot points, or maybe a lot of it doesn't really keep up the tension because it wants to focus on character development, which doesn't sound like it's bad, and it's not. But the thing is, if you're not really invested in these characters, you can get bored in the middle.
If you're not a fan of war movies,
it's definitely not like a bunch of battling or a bunch of war tactics. It's these guys hanging out.
Yeah.
In Vietnam,
smoking dope.
Yeah, which is the point, because it's developing these characters. But if you're just sure these characters are fine, you're gonna get bored for sure.
Yeah. The tension is there, but it's just.
I mean, the
tension in the platoon, but there's not a lot of tension where when they're fighting. It's the battles are more a means to an end.
Yeah,
it's not about the battles. Don't watch the movie thinking it's about the battles.
No,
it's not like We Were Soldiers, where it's about this massive battle. It's about the platoon.
Thinking we're gonna see a bunch of action. Yeah. It's gonna be awesome. There is sections in this movie where everybody's just really just hanging out.
The fact of, but the reason Oliver Stone wanted to portray it that way is because and the way he shoots the battles in a way that, it's very different from how you usually see movie battles shot. Mm-hmm. You're like, it's chaotic and it's just, you're down. It feels like they're all just kind of down, hiding in cover. And because he said that's how it really was. It wasn't like this thing where, everybody would just stand up and just like light up a bunch of people, He wanted to show it how it really was. Yeah. And that's another aspect of the battle scenes that makes the battle scenes a little bit different, but they're more realistic.
Yeah, so, I think that character development, A+, and the movie is called Platoon. It is not Platoon. Mm-hmm. But a negative is it needed to keep up the tension, make us more focused on the plot, more because if you didn't care about the plot, you could get lost for sure. Mm-hmm. So that's a negative for me. That makes it not it's definitely not. I would say one thing, and this isn't a bad thing. It's not the kind of movie where you're just like, oh, let's rewatch Platoon.
No, it's an emotional ride.
It's kind of like John said this before we watched it. He was like, it's kind of like the Passion of the Christ, and I was like,
well, yeah,
what?
I didn't mean it in terms of plot.
But it's true because it's not like you're not like, let's watch the Passion of the Christ. That would be fun,
You watch it to learn.
Yeah, you watch it to learn and to appreciate it.
It's
not like one of those fun rewatch.
It's not like a Christopher Nolan movie. I would say that the movie was made to show what it was really like, and that means it's going to be realistic. And it's pretty gritty. There's some, they use a lot of colorful language, and but that's probably that's how I'm sure that's how it was.
He's riding home to his grandma.
And anyway,
it's like, what about your mom or dad or girlfriend?
So now, so do we want to touch a little bit on themes?
Well, the theme of this movie is brotherhood.
Yes. Well, no. Well, a little bit. I'd say brotherhood and what kind of. I'd say conflict. I'd just say conflict.
Something like
just kind of like inner conflicts.
Or maybe
morality.
Madness.
Morality.
I'd say it's about the madness of the Vietnam War.
But also just not just the morality, the keeping up the morality, but it's also deciding your morality, what's right, what's wrong, that kind of thing.
I'd say I wouldn't say brotherhood. I would say morality and how you choose. But I'd say it's really ultimately about just the madness of war.
Okay, I think we should all give the movie our ranking and our final opinion on it.
Yeah.
So Nate, you go ahead and just say what
this movie is an 8 out of 10. Mm-hmm. Solid, really solid. That's a good rating. I really like historical dramas. This historical drama was accurate. It was entertaining. It was, it was just solid.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It wasn't perfect.
Yep.
But
no
very few
movies
are. As I will say about every movie, it's not The Last Samurai, which me and John literally just sat down and then raved about for 40 minutes and then turned the camera off. We were like, this is amazing.
Dang, I should have been there for that, man.
But I would give this an 8.5 out of 10. This mainly because this movie this is one of the first movies I watched that really got me into prestige cinema, I guess you would call it, where it's like
I don't know what that means.
So prestige cinema is so you think of blockbusters, like the big action movies and that are everybody goes to see. Yeah. Well, this got me into watching smaller movies and movies that aren't necessarily big and crazy. Yeah. It's about people and about relationships and conflict. And it's more personal movies. Yeah, exactly. And so this was one of the first personal movies I watched, and smaller budgeted movies. And it really it's always been had a big effect on me. I've always been very touched by it, and kind of it makes me think a lot. And so I give it an 8.5, possibly maybe even 8.6, 8.7. It's very high on my list of war movies, because it's up there, probably top 5 war movies of all time for me.
Okay, that's good.
War movies.
I'm gonna be the naysayer and give it a 7, which isn't bad. I appreciate the character development and the directing. Other than that, I think the movie lacks in some intensity towards there's a very large gap in the middle where it's not necessarily no action. It's just the plot is just kind of nobody really cares what's happening, which I understand that it's more about the platoon. It's
Yeah.
about developing this platoon.
Understand what the movie's about.
Yeah,
before
you
watch
have
it.
to go into it thinking that. But I'm just saying, like, enjoyability. Like, there's some movies where I'm going to sit down and I'm just, like, even slower movies, like The Godfather or whatever, like, you're going to sit down and you just can't stop watching. But,
Yeah.
like, if the power would have cut off in the house and this would have been, you know, stopped halfway through, I would have been like, oh, that's unfortunate, and probably gone to bed.
Yeah.
But, you know, having said that, it's still, I really appreciate the directing, the character development, the script, you know, the writing, the realism that added to it. Great war movies.
Yeah, and
overall, I'll give it
a fun fact I'll point out is that the actors, like I said, went through a 2-week intensive boot camp designed by a Marine who was in Vietnam, so they knew what it was like to be a grunt before they even started filming. So they did all the stuff that they
That
portray
must have
in
been
the
the
movie.
most emotionally satisfying experience.
I know they said all
for
the
that Marine.
See, yeah.
He was like
There's a
all
documentary
these
I'd love to show y'all
stupid
sometime
Hollywood
about it.
people.
That
I'm
y'all
gonna
will-
show
there's a documentary I'd love to show y'all, and I highly recommend it. It's called A Tour of the Inferno: The Making of Platoon. It's very good. Walks you through how they made it and talks about that boot camp. But these actors, most of them were first time actors, and even since then, they still keep up because they went through this crazy boot camp. It wasn't just like a normal movie where they showed up and filmed their scenes and were out of there. No, they were down in the Philippines for 6 months or something, and they went through this intensive boot camp. So yeah, it's really cool because they've maintained all 30 of them, whatever, have maintained this relationship.
Yeah.
You
It
know,
was
35 years
it
later.
was so realistic
37
that
years
they
later.
actually went to Vietnam and fought the Viet Cong,
Well, I
and
mean-
then filmed it.
I mean, that's basically the only thing they didn't do after the people went through the training, the boot camp. The director actually went to Vietnam. Like, the realism is here on this
Yeah,
movie. Like,
that's the
literally,
best thing about it.
The
is
only
the
thing they
realism.
don't do is actually shoot people.
Yeah.
they actually joined the U.S. Army.
That's-
Speaking
yeah.
of shooting people, why are M16 mags so short? I'll
Yeah,
never
They
understand
have
that.
like 3 shots each. Like, bang, 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 all reload.
Anyway.
And so, a kind of fun fact about the M16, the first version of it, I was told by the veterans, was so bad about jamming. They said they would find entire patrols all dead, all with their guns jammed.
No.
And
Yeah.
so they were like, they jump out of the woods and like click, 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 and just all
That's
done.
But also, I was watching an interview with Tom Berenger, who played Sergeant Barnes, and he said that they didn't know that this movie was going to be a success because to them this was just a little $7 million movie that and they were releasing it at Christmas time, so they were like, "What is he thinking? Why this is like not a Christmas? This is nothing to this is not gonna. That's not a good time to release this, just considering what type of movie it is." And he said that basically the best. They were looking at reviews and they were all just all positive. There wasn't like a negative review out there when the movie came out, and that's obviously why it ended up winning Best Picture and everything. But he said that the vets all reviewed it positively, whether or not they enjoyed watching it, because obviously that's what they went through. They all gave it positive reviews and said that it's the most accurate Vietnam movie ever made, and they still say that, which is a testament to the accuracy and realism of the movie.
Yeah, walking away, it makes you think, why would anybody ever want a second term in Vietnam? If you make it through a term, it's like...
Yeah,
Oof,
one of the guys
take me home.
I met went 3 terms, which was pretty crazy. Even though he was forced, he didn't want to go to Vietnam. He was drafted and considered going to Canada to get away from it, but then decided against it.
All right, so
Some of these people, I just wanted to mention,
I'm sorry.
they were so traumatized. By the way, the Vietnam War is when the term post-traumatic stress disorder became a thing. Like, obviously, people were affected by that sort of thing before that, but this is when it was coined that way. And it affected people so much. One of the gentlemen who was talking to us is the dad of our teacher. That's how, she got him in there. But she's 44, and he started talking to her about this 2 years ago.
Yeah, she said...
And so she didn't hear a breath about the Vietnam War for 42 years from him. People would often ask her, have you heard any stories? And it would just be like, no, I've never heard anything.
Yeah. I remember asking her that, and she was like, nope. Anyway, but all right, so he gave his final thoughts. Yeah,
I'm always down for a realistic movie. I'm always down for a war movie. Platoon satisfies. It's worth your time. So give it a watch.
Yep. My final thoughts, I would highly recommend it. Like I said, give it an 8.5 out of 10. It's very realistic, very accurate. Made by a guy who was in Vietnam. That's basically all you gotta say.
Yeah.
And also highly recommend. A lot of his other movies are very good. Check out Oliver Stone's filmography. He's done a lot of good movies.
We might
But,
cover more of this.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, he's done a lot more historical movies.
Speaking of that, like, just no promises, but what are we looking at covering next? Maybe
I have no idea.
I know we're
Alexander.
I know we're staying on history movies.
You're right now.
so I know we said something about Troy. And Alexander.
Alexander's an option. I think Alexander would be
Alexander's
cool.
definitely.
Alexander's directed by Oliver Stone.
Okay, here's a movie
There it
that
is.
I love. Darkest Hour.
Okay, yeah, that's something.
Darkest
Sure.
Hours, okay.
Yeah, I'm not as big of a
amazing.
fan of that either.
Dunkirk, we
love
should do
that
Dunkirk.
movie.
And that
Yeah.
could
We'll just sit down and talk about
But
it.
or you should do maybe the one that none of us has seen. Amistad is a very good historical movie that I've
He's
heard
talking
is-
about this movie as a legal thriller
Yeah.
from before the Civil War era when they found a ship of slaves and couldn't decide if they were.
Well, no, I mean I've heard it's good.
Well, we'll discuss
We'll do
this.
something
Yeah.
probably
Whatever y'all wanna
history
do.
related. So
Whatever y'all want to do.
All right. So
that concludes
until
our
next time.
All right.
Third
Yep.
podcast.
Yep.
All right.
It's only our third podcast. It's your first podcast.
Yep.
I just realized Noah's the proverbial new guy in this
Anyway.
in the Vietnam War of our podcast.
All right. Well,
All right.
see you later.
That concludes it.